Okay, folks, it's book review time. Today we're going to be reviewing Thinking Fast and Slow from Daniel Kahneman. Even though it is not a new book, it's one of the most important books that you might read this year. It's going to help you think, and all of us think and act better, and it's going to help us think about the way we think, which is really important right now in our life. There are so many hundreds of pages in this book. As you can see, it is a very, very massive book. And like any good psychology or economy book, it's going to scientifically attempt to prove things that we've already known or maybe have suspected in ways that make it very clear. So it's very detailed, very excellent. And I'm going to get into why I think everybody must read this book in this book review. So going back thousands of years, we have philosophers like Plato who have talked about the duality of the mind, or you may have heard these things. Plato has the allegory of the chariot or the charioteer, in which he sort of puts forth that the reason or the intellect is the person driving the chariot. They're the ones steering. And then there are two horses, as he says, which you could say are our body or our impulses. And there's always this duality between good impulses and bad impulses, things that we do right without thinking about it, and bad impulses might be lust or sexual things or violence or things that aren't helping us. And it's the job of the reason to kind of steer the chariot, as it were. So there's been a lot of talk for thousands of years about this feeling that the brain is up here, the body is doing this other thing. There's this duality. But Daniel Kahneman puts forth a similar kind of thing, and he takes credit for inventing what he calls System 1 and System 2. So he suggests that System 1 is this fast, immediate, knee-jerk process. It's how we make most of the decisions of our life. It's where we live most of our life. We don't have time to think in depth or get a pen and paper out for most of life's problems, so it's important that we're able to assess lots of information very, very rapidly and make quick decisions. That's System 1. System 2 is our methodical detail, the system where we're going to take that pen and paper, we're going to work something out. For example, if I tell you what is 4853 times 5294, you can't figure that out with System 1. Your System 1 immediately shuts down and you have to go into that System 2 brain. It's going to take you a lot longer and it's going to take you a lot more mental effort. So because going into System 2 takes so much more effort and it takes so much more time, we live most of our life in System 1, where we just approximate things and we say, okay, this could be about 25,000. We don't need to know the exact answer, and that's probably way, way off. Shows you how little I want to engage my brain on that problem. But we spend most of our time in the one with the least effort, and most of the time that serves us well, but it also causes us to make errors in judgment or biases, and this could have to do with racial bias or any other kind of negative bias, prejudice that we might experience in our life. We seldom engage System 2 because it's just a lot more effort on our part. So let me give you an example of something that trips up the System 1. So if I tell you that a bat and ball, and this, by the way, trips up a lot of Harvard undergraduates and people who got perfect scores on the SAT, it trips up a lot of very smart people who use System 1. If I tell you a baseball bat and a baseball cost $1.10 together, and I say the baseball bat costs $1 more than the baseball, how much do each of them cost separately? Well, the vast majority of people will instantly say the ball costs 10 cents, the baseball bat costs $1. Seems reasonable. However, it's false, because if the ball costs 10 cents and the baseball bat costs $1 more, that would be $1.10 plus 10 cents, which is $1.20, which is not the question. So the real answer is the ball costs 5 cents, the baseball bat costs $1.05, which equals $1.10, but very, very few people get that. They'll get it if they work it out and they put it on paper, but they won't get it if they just quickly say the first thing that comes to their mind. So this book tears apart when the thing that quickly comes to our mind is wrong. That's what we call bias or prejudice. Now, heuristics, broadly speaking, are mental shortcuts that we make. They're little tools that we use to get to an approximation of an answer rather than the exact answer. And in much of our life, heuristics are a very, very valuable tool. However, if you're trying to be NASA and land something on a satellite on an asteroid or a comet millions of miles away, heuristics aren't going to do the job. And that's obviously much more difficult. So heuristics are a survival mechanism. We have gotten this far as a species because we know that we don't have time to think about everything. Like if there's a tiger coming at you, you don't have time to analyze why that could hurt you. Some part of your brain has to immediately go, I got to get out of here, before you have the time to actually think about it. That's heuristics working to save us. That's a great example. But a negative example would be if you have, for example, bad associations with an entire race of people. And Harvard did a study on this that's not covered in this book, but the IAT, or the implicit attitude test, I believe it is, shows how people can be biased in their snap judgment against an entire group of people based on the color of their skin or certain other physical attributes that are immediately obvious, like whether they have tattoos or piercings. You know the drill. So these are the biases, and this is how it gets wrong. So he goes into a great deal about many situations where we make mistakes in this regard. Also, we're much more, we hate losing much more than we love winning. So most people will treat the circumstance of the choice of possibly winning $1,000 very differently from the choice of possibly losing $1,000. And he sets up these great examples where people will treat losing in one way or winning in one way, losing in another way, and they'll make a mistake, or they won't be consistent in their actions. They're not appropriately valuing risk. For example, another one he might say is if he gives, some characteristics of a woman named Linda and says she's a free spirit, or she's a fun-loving person. She cares deeply about her morals. She's very passionate about what she does. She's artistic. And then they give two different groups of people a scenario, and they say, what's more likely to one group, that Linda is a bank teller, or another group that Linda is a bank teller feminist? Well, people will say that it's more likely that she is a feminist bank teller than that she is a bank teller. But of course, a feminist bank teller is a subset of bank teller, so it's obviously more likely that she is a bank teller than that she is a feminist bank teller. So there are just many subtle ways that our intuition about things can be wrong. And this is why this book is so important. Like, we have snap judgments, and I'm saying it backwards. We have snap judgments about people based on their political beliefs. All Republicans behave like this. All Democrats behave like that. But that is system one. That is the priming. That's not system two, where we're looking at things in a more in-depth manner. And he goes into great detail of all kinds of mathematical models about why that is the case. So that's really, really, really great. Another example of how we make mistakes is when it comes to hindsight or predicting the future. So he will talk about how when we know that a bridge collapsed in the past, and you ask a group of people, should we have put another person on duty there to monitor the bridge collapsing? Something like 80-90% of those people will say, yes, it was irresponsible not to have another person monitoring that, because if they had done that, the bridge wouldn't collapse. But when you give a group of people that same scenario in advance and you say, hey, here's a bridge that hasn't collapsed, and you don't even mention the word collapsed, you say, should we just put another person there at great expense in case the bridge collapses? Most people will say no. So this is inconsistent in our life, and hindsight being 20/20, but he talks about that predicting the future is essentially impossible, and it makes so much more sense looking back. Nothing makes sense looking forward. Even things like this pandemic seemed inevitable looking back, but looking forward, it was much harder to predict. And he illustrates this point with some of the top CFOs in the financial industry. He asked them to predict the stock market trend of the next year, and he found that even though they were very confident, these experts, they were also wrong. Their opinion was literally the opposite of what happened. If you had trusted the experts in that sector, you would have been wrong, and you would have done better to do the opposite of what they said. So he really breaks down this idea of expert or intuition in great detail. And also on things that seem like art, like the judging of Bordeaux wines, for example, seems like a sommelier's realm, something that you really need to be an expert to do. Well, he found that a formula would predict the value of Bordeaux wine in the future far better than an individual's expert opinion. And there are many such examples of this. Also in the hospital, when an individual, when a doctor would say, when does a child need help? When are they not breathing? Many people said, trust the doctor because their intuition and experience should tell you. But of course, now there's simple formulas that are used that are actually much more effective than the intuition of any doctor. Like if X happens, do this. If this many seconds happen before this, do this. And formulas routinely beat expert opinion and intuition because, again, the whole point of this book is that our intuition and opinions are often wrong. This has deep implications, even though it's not really addressed, deep implications for AI, for data. We live in an increasingly data-driven world. Google algorithms aren't relying on intuition. Netflix algorithms aren't relying on intuition. They're relying on data to make their decisions. And this book would be kind of an argument for that. So many different ways that our thinking can be wrong. Also about policies regarding risk. Like, for example, should you always get the extended warranty package or should you never get the extended warranty package? Well, of course, the answer is that generally speaking, if one commits to never purchasing an extended warranty, they will be better off in the long run because that's a risk policy that will make more sense. And understanding fully that never purchasing an extended warranty might mean that sometimes things will break and you'll need to pay full price to replace them or for heavy repairs. But the policy would dictate that over the course of your lifetime, over the course of many such instances, the occasional cost of replacing a dishwasher outright is going to be less than getting the extended warranty every time. So he talks about risk policy, ways of thinking about finances, ways of thinking about moving, about where to live. So many pieces of gold in here. I couldn't get into it all unless I spent 400 pages on it myself, but you will think differently about the way that you think after you read this book. You will think differently about the way that you form opinions and the way that other people form opinions. It's a brilliant book. I think you could get there with philosophy alone. If you really studied Plato and all of the other philosophers, Stoics and whatnot, you'd have a lot of these ideas already. But the way that he systematically breaks it down in a scientific way is truly exceptional. It's a heavy one, but I know that your life will improve if you read it. So that is Thinking Fast and Slow from Daniel Kahneman. Hope you enjoyed. If you enjoy more book reviews, be sure to subscribe to this channel, leave your comment. What did you think about this? Did you enjoy this book? Did you find it to be helpful in your own life? Would you recommend it? Are there any other books that you recommend that you would like for me to do a review on? Let me know.